stage physicist who came all the way from India, only a few days delayed due to visa problems and fogs and weather and things completely out of our control. But I would like to introduce to you Gottfried Lewis, who is at the physics department at the Mahatma Gandhi University in Kerala. And then I think Kerala. Sorry. And I think I need my CV.
Good evening to all. Thank you for the nice introduction. Yeah. And sorry for the change in timetable, which variable is because of several problems. I should have parked on the first day. And this is a problem which I have undertook just because of a phenomenon which has occurred in our place. It is called as the, it can be called as a red rain phenomenon, which has occurred in our Kerala, in which large number of red cells were found in the mixed with rainwater, and as a result, red colored rain appeared in many places. It lasted for 2 months. So I have studied this problem along with my student Santosh Kumar, and it was not a very extensive study in the sense that I used very high technology or modern technique of analysis because it was not any sponsored research or anything like that. So there are some shortcomings in that respect. But I think I have through these 2 papers, I have produced some case which requires attention, because you can see that there are evident some experimental things which I can repeat, and regarding the new biology of this extremophiles, and this first paper introduces actually the physical features of the red rain phenomenon and show how it can have a common origin. So the most natural explanation whenever something happens on Earth is a terrestrial explanation for a phenomenon. But in this case, what I find is that a terrestrial explanation is very difficult or impossible for me to find, even after several possibilities, considering several possibilities. So that was not enough. And if even I have even some evidences for the first paper, but the reason why I ventured into this extraordinary claim is because of the second paper. That is, it shows very special characteristics in its growth, and it is an repeatable experiment. So that some explanation. If it is not a biology, then somebody has to explain why it happens like that. So this is the essentially this is what happened. The red rain phenomena started all on a sudden, starting from July 25th on 2001, and along with that, there were some cases of yellow rain and some cases of black rain and green rain. All these were reported, but reliable samples of only this yellow rain and red rain could not be obtained. So in this, most of the cases it was red rain, and some cases it was yellow rain. So this is a record is there because it is already in the internet. Several websites are carrying this news, and all our local newspapers are covered this. And what is the reason for this happening? Nobody knows. And the one special situation in our state is that it is a thickly populated state, and there are also a lot of rural areas where people collect this water for their drinking and other purposes, where this rainwater is used for their consumption. And as a result, if a change is occurring in the water, people will notice that. So in town areas, if it happens, we don't notice it. It may in the night time also, etc. It will comes and goes. So where the people are collecting this water, it is more noticeable, and that special situation, and it is thickly populated area, has resulted in this observation of this thing. And my study actually goes into this red cells, and yellow rain actually we have seen, and it is some organic material. That is all I can say. But extensive elemental analysis has not been done. Regarding the red cells, there are some studies. I follow this. Okay, anyway, we follow this. This is state Kerala in Indian map, and this is a small southern state, and it has occurred in this region. And it is another thing is that we have sea here and here, and this of course is Pakistan and land area. So this is after this Africa is coming, and so we don't know anything happened here. There is no record here. So anything happening here also we do not know. But it was happening mostly concentrated in this certain districts in this Kerala. So we'll go to the next slide. So this is just an image. This color has not come very well in this slide. This has got a reddish color, and this color is actually due to the suspension of cells. So if you keep this water for some time, these cells will settle down, and as a result it can become colorless, and there is a sediment formation. Actually under the microscope one can see that these are all actually cells. So this is one 400 x magnified view of the cells. So these cells are very smooth objects, and they are partly transparent also, because you can see the other cell through the top ones, and this is not an opaque object, and it has the color is actually, and the actual color is much more intense and red. In this photograph conversion, it will become actually here it is more reddish, and the projection system slightly different colors will come. So this is the shape of the cells, and you can see that it has all happened in, I have listed in that paper. You have much of it, not many of you are having a copy of that. There are some 124 cases of this phenomenon listed in from the newspaper reports, because because it is a strange phenomenon. Several people observing these reports to the press, and then the press gives a small news item. So that way, if you collect all the news items, you can get a rough idea of how it is.
Yeah. So I have a question. So this is just looking at the sedimentation. You have not done any purification. So is that?
It's not purification, because the coloring matter is this. Normally, the rainwater is not containing anything. It is a pure water.
Yeah, but so this is not. You don't have any dust particles.
Dust particles. If there is a dust particles, you will not give coloring like this, because the coloring matter.
So is that the raw? This is the only particular
material salt in that.
Yeah. So
dust particle may be there, because in the normal rainwater if you take, and if you take a photograph, you will not get any coloration and a particle like this, because the normal rainwater is transparent, pure water like. Some this dust will be there in that. That is not going to give any coloration. So this is a dramatic color change, and it is something like fearsome for people, because it is something like blood flowing in some places, because it's so intense in color. So that it attracts the people, and it's falling on their clothes, it's coloring the clothes. So it is very evident that something is mixing with that. So if you look at the microscope, the coloring material is this. It is
I don't want to interrupt, but concerning this image, could you explain to somebody, I'm a physicist who is not used to look at cells under the microscope, which particular features make you identify these objects as cells? I presume cells you use in the term as a biological
I'm coming to
cell.
that. I think if we go like that, then we will complete that.
Okay.
See, there is a photograph which shows this layered structure. That is why I call it cell. So the let us say it is a particle right now. So what is the source of this particle? Where can this come from? So there are some assumptions can be taken that it is coming from another part of the earth and through some dust strong process. So then you should explain why it is falling on certain districts repeatedly for 2 months, and then you should explain why it is falling for so many days for 2 months in certain geographical concentrated on certain geographical area. So and then this material shows the second paper. I show that it is having some very extraordinary biological properties. So that also has to be explained. So if it is something coming from some part of the earth by some process, then we have to identify from which part of the globe such a biology can come. So these are very and then another evidence for a meteoric origin is actually a sonic boom which was heard just before the red rain phenomenon occurred. So that is actually another reason for assuming a cometary origin for this. So even if you forget that sonic boom, this biology has to be explained. The distribution, geographical distribution and temporal distribution has to be explained by any other process. So I don't find any terrestrial process which can do that. If a tornado happens and from some sea or something, it will not linger around for 2 months. So from trees you cannot have this is a few hundred kilometers it is happening. So from a tree, how can you have this rising from trees and falling like this? So these are all unexplained.
So did I understand you right? So it was for several months that you had this?
2 months. Specifically, I will show you a graph of that. Just coming to that. So the one of the reasons for this assuming a cometary origin is the sonic boom, which is possibly due to the meteor airburst event. So this sound was heard by several people in a place called Changanasheri in Kottayam district. So there I have actually personally met those people, and from the description it is clear that it is not a thunderstorm, because thunderstorm occurs as a series of sound waves. It is not just one single bang and stops. So this happened in the early morning at 5:30 a.m. So people are not outside. Most of the people are inside the house, and the possibility of seeing a meteor falling is less. And in addition to that, it is a rainy season and the sky is very much clouded. So any event in the atmosphere will not be visible. So if it is happening above 5 kilometers, the cloud above the cloud, a meteor event will not be observed. So there are some reports which say that a flash of sky light was there in the sky, but I did not meet any person. It came in the paper, so they saw some flash of light, but I did not meet the person who have seen that. But the sound was very much distinguishable, because they said that the roof is going to fall down. Such a heavy, intense sound was said. So sonic boom is something which can produce. It is a low frequency, short duration sound that can produce that kind of vibrations in the housing structures. So that is why I support that sonic boom idea, which must have been due to the air bursting of the final part of the cometary meteor. Now the indirect evidence for assuming a cometary origin is the geographical distribution, similar to the following meteor. So this is the indirect evidence. And then second indirect evidence is the distribution in time. explained by the stratospheric particle settling. So these are the two arguments which are raised as an indirect evidence for the quantum theory. So here this is a plot of the number of color wave incidents in Kerala on different dates. So you can see that this has started suddenly on 25th July, and then there were several cases reported from different parts of the state, and then up to this day the maximum number of cases, these are the number of cases counted on the list given in the paper. So this lasted for this much days, and then there were incidents again, and up to 28th it was there, and then of course some incidents may have occurred after that, may not have been observed, but this is a rough distribution of what has happened. So there is a large number of cases starting with this date and continuing like that, a decay pattern. So the absence of there is some missing here. So this is to be understood in terms of the fact that the rain, only if there is a rain, the rain can be observed. Otherwise, it cannot be observed. So I have this slide. I am plotting the rain data. So here there is a gap here. During this period, the rain was not actually there. So that is why in the other gap also, the rain is not there. So another significant observation here is this has happened during a rainy season. So before 25th July also there was heavy rain in the state. So this is not something which is a result of sudden dust washing out with the starting of the rainy season. It was not like that. And in many cases, during a rain is taking place in some places, suddenly the color changes. So we cannot say that it is a dust washing out from somewhere. This feature, and the third slide is actually the distribution of this rain in the states. And this becomes more clear when I show the other slide, which shows the map of Kerala. So here you can see that Kottayam is the weakest peak activity, and Ernakulam, Pathanamthitta, Alappuzha. These are actually nearby districts. So this is a concentrated area or the head of the elliptical region where this explosion has taken, and this Kottayam is the place where the sonic boom is actually heard. So from that, it is an assumption that it is where it has come down to make this air bursting explosion. So now why this actually is to why this has happened for 2 months. This is a calculation to explain that. This is I don't have to explain much because it is just a stock formula to calculate the velocity of the particle which is coming down. So if you calculate the velocity, assuming these particles are having a size of 10 micrometers and assuming a density of say 1.5 times water, we can simply get the velocities. So taking the standard atmosphere values for viscosity and density, we see that the velocity doesn't vary much, and this is the average velocity around say 500 meters per day. So a particle of this size, if we actually it has got a square dependence on size, so all the particles are not 10 micrometer size. Some of them are say 4 micrometers. So
have you considered the aspect of horizontal transportation due to wind patterns and speed?
no, horizontal transportation are not considered because it is in the stratosphere is a relatively calm area. The temperature differences are not there, and usually the method by which any particle dropped there is removed by settling process. And now in the troposphere we have this horizontal winds. Stratosphere is relatively calm area. But in the jet stream type of activity is there, some at around some 10 kilometers area, that may carry the particles. But That is why I found that this map on both sides we have sea. So if something goes into that, it will not be noticed. So if we assume that the stratosphere is process is taking place, then if this cometary meteor, if it is dropping the cells at say 50 kilometers or 40 kilometers, etc., 30 kilometers during its transit, then it can spread this dust into these regions, and these clouds can settle down slowly. So this cloud settling will result in slow process of if it is coming like this. So this may arrive at different times. So this explains why the rain is taking place for 2 months. This settling. So during its a path like this, what I have seen is that there is some random fragmentation which is taking place. So this meteor object is assumed to be a material which is highly fragile and contains a thick collection of these red cells. So one may wonder whether such an object is existing, but it can exist. We don't know the exact composition of all the compounds. And if we write a process in the second paper, I discuss a method by which how it can come in the interstellar space and form cometary bodies.
So what did you sketch there on the blackboard?
Which one?
What did you sketch on the blackboard?
I said actually some due to the fragment dropping, if clouds are formed like this, the stratosphere, they will slowly settle.
Yes.
So once they reach suppose this is the troposphere, where the rain clouds are here. So if it comes here, it will interact with the rain cloud and the rain will color.
Okay. And then
The rain will occur there, and after some time, a few days, another fragment may interact with this cloud. So only when this cloud interacts with the rain cloud, so that's time. This rain will fall. If there is no rain, it is a dry season. This will never be noticed because these particles are so fine and it will get simply dispersed in the wind. So nobody will notice that. So only when there is a rain.
Why should these cells be isolated and not inside drops of water?
That is why I don't understand. I am assuming a body which disintegrates into fine particles. So we don't know how these cells are bound together. It is possibly an unusual type of binding. Once it enters the atmosphere, they disperse like this. So we don't know the exact way this has been put together. So such a body is probably existing. That is the assumption.
So can I ask one more question? Still, whether it's a meteor or a comet, or whether it comes from soil that has been swirled up, then can I ask again? So when you looked at the sedimentation in the rainwater, the only thing you found when you looked under the microscope were these small
This is
spherical things.
Yeah,
This is a raw material that you took from the sedimentation rainwater.
It is without any purification or separation process.
Okay.
It is the raw material I take. Actually, if you settle it and then take there is no separation method or anything like that.
Right.
I am not separating it and anything like that. It is just a take. So you can sometimes see bacteria, 1 or 2 of them running around, and but this is the main thing. So we have not done any purification. So this is what I just now explained. This is the rate at which these cells can settle. But the is a rough calculation. So 60 days need not be that. Even it can extend to 1 year if it is sufficiently high and the particle sizes are sort of small. And then if there is some other thermal process by which because what I think is several complicated systems can come, because if there is a cloud of this material, then sunlight can interact with that and local heating can be produced. and then that may create an upward lifting. So several things can happen if it is deposited in the stratosphere, and that may delay the process of these particles coming down. So that way it can extend, and it can go to the other part of the globe also by this jet stream process. So all those things can happen. So that is what is explained in the second one. Already have now this is the assumed part of the meteor. This is the northern region of Kerala. It's that tip of India, which is down here, and you can see that this red arrow is indicating the direction in which this has possibly come, and this is the Changanasheri, which where the people have heard this loud sound, and there are some people in Pathanamthitta also. Have some of my friends told me that some people heard here also. But actually, I met people who heard here, which is this is the place where the first time the this red rain was reported, and the main cases were concentrated around this place. This is Pathanamthitta district, and this is Alappuzha, Idukki, and Ernakulam. So in the previous graph, you can see that maximum concentration is taking place here, and surprisingly, even though this Trivandrum or Thiruvananthapuram is nearby, there are only 1 or 2 cases reported from here. That is because it has already reached it is moving like this. So this is this TVM, and this is Kottayam. So the whole thing ends here. If the explosion is taking place somewhere here, then it won't reach Trivandrum. So otherwise, at the same time, it can reach districts like Kannur, which is here, or Kasaragod. It is possible. Some fragments going down like this, moving the path. So this is like this. So a spray of thing must have taken place. So we don't know how exactly it has fragmented and dispersed. So why it has not come to this stage, this part of the stage, is possibly because the explosion it has already gone down. Otherwise, and at the same time, it has happened all these places. So this is a recreation of the path from this data, an assumption of the path.
Do you have any comparison with direction of winds in the upper troposphere and the stratosphere at that point?
There are actually no such an analysis has not been done. Whether
global, I mean, just from the weather forecasts.
Wind direction data is very difficult to get. But another thing is, this is happening for 2 months in different places. So it is not a sudden thing. Within 2 days, it is not over. If it is happening here and within 2 or 3 days, it is over. You see that the distance here is roughly this is given the 100 kilometers per latitude. So it is some 500 kilometer stretch. So this if it is happening by within a few days, the whole thing will be over. So why should it take place for so much time? This is the problem.
Well, I mean, I could invent a lot of explanations, but could you tell us a little bit about the property of these cells? Do you have some investigations of that?
This element analysis, it was not done by me, but it was done by the Center for Earth Science Studies, who have actually first investigated this, and they actually first said that this after going to the Changanasheri area, they have said that this red rain is due to a meteor explosion. But then it was found that these red cells are biological cells, in the sense that they contain carbon and they can be charred by heating, just like an algae. So they have given that case to the Tropical Botanical Research Garden there, and they actually could not correlate this meteor and this thing. They see that this is like that. So they have a problem, and the explanation is not was given in the first lecture. I don't know whether they look for nitrogen. I just they have a report. I just took this from the report. So nitrogen is not shown.
This is going to be very important because they do the same ratio.
Yeah.
If you try to add up, they don't add up to 100.
That is why this nitrogen oxygen may not have been analyzed.
Okay.
By weight. So that's why I said that it is not my data, and it has come in the report, and they have to do a of this. So we have to take this data like what they observe, and some healthy bacteria may be there, and that may also contribute slightly to that. I don't know how much they have purified it. So whether there is a local dust in that, these things are quite unknown. So the next slide shows the data on the display cells here. So this is what I don't know. So I don't know whether ordinary biology cells. So there is chromium, manganese, copper, nickel. It may be there in the Earth's dust, but they have taken the cell but the blood cells. So the next one. These are some of the rare elements. I was actually wondering in the morning lecture, there was a mention about iridium, and whether iridium is this or not, I was not sure. I don't find it, I think. There is no iridium in this. So, these are the content of this cell, and there are 50% carbon. That is the reason, and this is again a repetition. So here actually you can see a cell structure, and this becomes there is a cell wall coming like this, and many of them are transparent, and this coloration is a variability. Some of them are even white, and some of them are reddish, and even some of them have slight greenish color, etc. are there in the actual observation. It has not come out in the picture that well. The size bar indicates the 10 micrometer. This is the size bar. This is another photograph. Cells. So in all these things, if you look at the cells through the actual looking, you can see the cell wall-like thing here. And in one slide, I have a broken wall also. See, this one has got a. This is after some dyeing with middle green or something like that. So the layer structure can be seen. See, there is an outer layer, another layer, and then inner layer. So, and there is some breakage here. So this is not. It is a typical biological cell structure. Thing like this. In a cyanobacteria, etc. This kind of layers you can see.
This looked to my eyes very much like spores of fungus that is there called.
Yeah, that is the explanation which was given by the biological study, this tropical botanical garden. They said it is a fungal spore. So that is the explanation given. It looks like a fungal spore, right? That is exact thing. And it also has the look of a cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria cell also look like this. So it is actually a spore, but our next study actually shows this how this is formed, and we have actually created this spore by another process. So this is another photo which is enlarged. So this also shows this layered structure, and there are actually two central this is not the initial study, but when we have understood the biology of this, it has become it is not the fission. Usually the biological bacteria divide and multiply. This is multiplying not by a division process, and this opposite process is a spore of that organism, and this spore is formed by fusion of two cells. One cell itself can become a spore, and then two cells can join together and develop an outer cell and form a spore, and three cells can sometimes form a spore. So these kind of things are happening.
So you have seen under microscope that two spores join.
Yeah, you cannot see it in real time, but you can see stages, in different stages. It is not happening suddenly. So you can make out from different observations. You see, when you grow this thing, you can see sometimes this. I will come to that that part in the coming
So
slides.
you can grow these things.
Yeah, grow. That is actually the second part of it.
Can I ask? I mean, the resolution here in these light microscopic photographs is not very good. Have you thought about it also doing
Electron microscope, you are asking about scanning as a SEM outcome.
Okay.
That I could not take because in our university such a facility was not easily available. I mean, it's not there. But in the nearby place also they had some machine problem. So I could not do that. That is one of the planned thing. A section of this may show the this layering better. So this is another thing which we observed when we heated these cells under the microscope on a heating stage. The cells were not immediately destroyed. Even at 200 degrees centigrade, they were almost having the same color. And after passing 300 degrees centigrade, they still show the this outer layer structure, and the coloring is also not completely spoiled. Even though complete very much dying is there, they were all well transferred to cells, but they have become a charred like darkened. It has become, and it has not exploded or something like that, or fragment like that. It has got some thermal withstanding capacity. So this is what I think, because these spores may be evolved for this cometary transfer, because when it enters a planetary atmosphere, it can get subjected to very high temperatures for a short time. So if this kind of capacity is there, then they can easily reach the ground without harm. So it may be related to that. Not only that, its growth temperature is actually very high.
Can I just ask you or a biologist, is it just standard today to put something in and pull out the DNA and analyze the DNA of any cell?
Yeah, that I am coming to that point. This is actually when this kind of things I observed. Actually, I am not a supporter of this panspermia theory or something like that. And when I observed these things, I thought I should fit that into a logical picture, and then I try to understand this. So, if it is coming from a meteoric object, then that should be the process which is called as the panspermia, which means that the seeds of life are coming from space. So now, just now we had a lecture on the we see that the life existing on Earth even at 3.8 billion years back. So which is somewhere around 4 billion years back, only the surface has cooled down to the suitable temperature, and just immediately we see the signs of life. And there is difficulty in explaining why life is formed so fast within that short period of time. And after that, you can see that several millions of years only cyanobacterial life is existing, and why life formed within a short period of time. That is a very difficult question to answer, because of the fact that the complexity of the living cell is very high. There is a DNA which contains specific information, and this specific information has to if you think that it is coming from random process, it is very difficult to explain. So that short or this rapid biogenesis can be easily explained if we assume that the life started here by seeding from space. So if this red rain process is such a seeding process, then that explains the whole thing. The life has not started on Earth, and it can come from space. And how it can come from space? And according to this, one of the modern ideas on panspermia, supported by several people, these comets are the most suitable vehicle for transferring the spores, because from the interstellar medium, the comets can accumulate this dust material, and they can actually release this organism in the Earth's upper atmosphere and migrate downwards. So when I saw these ideas, I found that this is very much fitting to this observation. So I have actually given the title of the first article as Cometary Panspermia Explains the Red Rain. So that is the reason why I went in that direction. So in some other places also the red rain has occurred. This is a recent report of red rain on July 29 in Vietnam. So the importance of this, I was actually not considering this very serious, but I find that this is now a significant thing, because if you take the location of Vietnam, it is on the same latitude as Kerala almost. So in the tropical country. So you have this India here and Kerala here. This is your Africa, and this is Philippines and Vietnam. All these places are here, and then you have Pacific Ocean. So if the cells something happening here, the cells transporting by this jet stream or something like that. It can, if it is going in this direction, it will reach Africa. There is no rain here, so nobody is going to see that. And if it is going in this direction, this may end up in sea. But if it is happening here, this may have a connection, but it happened actually after 1 year exactly. So that is one reason it may have a connection here. Another reason, which I have not discussed in the paper, is that whether this an object of this kind has been, I don't know whether it happened astrologically, whether a fragment has captured into Earth's orbit. So it may be orbiting, the small fragments may be orbiting, and it can fall down into the, just like the re-entering spacecrafts, and that will be the small, the least velocity by which they can enter. So that type of thing, whether it has happened, so that will explain an appearance of this red rain after 1 year. Otherwise, it is trapped in the stratosphere by some process and is happening. So no more analysis report is available on this. Only this news item is seen in the thing. So. And in the red rain in the history, you can see this website, and you can see in the 1800s, 17th century, etc. There were some red rain in Italy and etc. London, and some meteoric connection. Somebody is saying all these things are discussed in this website. So some ancient red rain records are there, and these are some old records. So whether we don't know there is a connection or not, but some of the color description they are giving, there is some matching. So I was thinking about this possibility, and I was told that this is a possibility which I just thought, and it has not been written in the paper. Because 2 years back, when I was working on this, I searched for the this meteor plus red particle in Google, and then I found this Greenland meteor event. They have found some red particles in the this Greenland meteor site, which an expedition then investigated. And first they thought that it is it is there in the stories in the CNN site. So after reading that, I just added these slides also just before coming here. Is there any connection? But I have talked to Risberg is the person who has actually seen those analyzed those particles, and I was told that it is a common algae which is found in the snow, which is that it has nothing to do with the meteor impact. So I investigated that after coming here. So this may have no connection. But at that time it was thought to be meteoric origin. Then it was said that it is an algae. Now another property of this UV visible is the this UV spectrum of this red rain, and this is the original red rain UV spectrum. You can see that there is a peak near this 200 nanometer, and there is not much features here. And this is shown by the dilute suspensions of this red rain, as well as the yellow rain is also showing similar spectra, even though there are no cells in that. So some component in this or the cell component in this is acting to give this spectrum. Not only that, the grown cells also have this, there is another slide which is showing that, also have this UV feature. So I have given some explanation behind that, because there was a study, there was a theory by this Hoyle and Vikram Singhe. They said that they have taken the spectrum of bacteria and said that the 217 nanometer UV feature of the interstellar dust can be explained as due to the presence of bacteria in space. So that was a connection which I thought may have here. So I have given that in the paper. So if these red cells are present in the interstellar medium, then it can possibly explain the 217 nanometer peak, which has this 217 nanometer is not well explained peak of the interstellar medium. So that peak may have connection with this these cells, which is present in the interstellar medium. Only thing is that this is a 200 nanometers, but if the cells are in the vacuum and low temperature, there may be a shift in this peak to 217, but that has to be definitely proved. Some estimate has to be done in the interstellar simulated conditions to see whether such a thing is happening. So this is also a speculation. But this is a definite feature of this organism, and when you grow it, very dilute suspension also shows this feature. So this is what I have said. My time is okay.
Time is up.
So I'd really like to see, okay, is that, are we now going to talk about the DNA and the, okay, good.
So this this organism is a hyperthermophilic organism. Since that it breaks all the records. So the current record is actually this was the record, and a recent finding is there which says that the 121 degree organism is there in the ocean climate system. So that is the record holders of thermophils. And this actually the upper temperature limit of life, we define it using the current understanding of the biomolecules, because what I am getting is actually a 300 degree growth temperature, which the current biomolecules will not survive. So we may have to think of different biomolecules if we are going to higher temperatures. So upper temperature limit of life, many articles define it as it cannot be more than 200 degrees Celsius, because none of the biomolecules stand above that temperature. So they will get hydrolyzed or something like that. So that upper temperature limit can never go beyond that 150 or 200 etc. So, but the property of life, as you know, they have capacity to adapt in different situations, and it is not entirely impossible to think of life forms which can grow at, live at very high temperatures using alternate kind of biology. So that is what is possible. High temperature has problems like stability of DNA, stability of biomolecules, and it has raises questions whether the DNA can survive 300 degrees centigrade. So we may have to go for another type of genetics. So this organism could be grown in different kind of substrates. These are actually all accidental findings. As I told you in the beginning, this is not extensively analyzed. By accidents, we jump upon all these kind of compounds. For the story of cedarwood oil, actually, our microscopic slide, we use this oil as an oil immersion in the objective, 1000x objective. And we found that this oil is getting turbid. Then we found that this organism is actually attacking this oil. So we found that it is a very good food for this. And that is why the cedarwood, all the first studies of 300 degree study, everything was done.
So but when you say that you grow it with 300 degrees, water with 300 degrees, it has to be in pretty high pressure.
Yeah, we have actually constructed a pressure cell. I don't have a picture of that here. Use this. We have constructed a cell like this by using boring a steel block. So there is a lid, and we have this nut and bolt. And here we put a Teflon sheet as the gasket. So this is the design of the cell. So this is a very thick steel vessel, and the sample bottle can be kept inside this. And the whole assembly can be put into a heating furnace. So it will produce very high temperature, very high pressures. Of course, the pressure if we go to 370, then the pressure will be 220 atmospheres. Here the supercritical pressure. So the one problem which we had is if you go to high temperatures, there is a this Teflon gasket just explodes. So we cannot go to 400, etc. So we have not actually found out the upper temperature limit of this organism. What we have found is a kind of optimum growth temperature at 300 degrees.
But when you say they grow, I mean, how can you know that they grow?
Yeah, that I will show you. So these are the kind of substrates, and then we have conducted experiments at 70 degrees and 90 degrees, and these kind of systems also. We were not confident to put this petrol, ethanol, methanol into this cell because some explosion may take place without firing and everything. So
this is what
these are inflammable materials. So these are all very strange thing. And this sulfuric acid is not actually a poison for this, whereas nitric acid will destroy this. So as I told you, this is not a systematic thing, and you can see this povidone iodine is one of the best germicide or the anti-bacterial material that we use for it kills all the viruses, bacteria, etc. And ethanol also is a germ killer. And this looks like a fiction. It is living on these things, but that is what I observed. So this is the growth study. For the growth, finding the growth of optimum temperature, what we did is we have loaded this with this water and a few drops of cedarwood oil. Then we seed it with a wire loop. Then keep the furnace to the required temperature and suddenly place it into that and take out. And then we also so we if it has grown, then we will become double because of the cell increase.
No, but you also count the cells in the microscope to see what
You can see the number of cells increased in the microscope, but I have not looked now because I never had that.
So I guess many precipitate probably at that temperature. We put in all these substrates.
No, it is only oil and water in this this particular experiment, and you can see the cells in this microscope. The round cells. I will have a movie of that also.
So before and after, you can see that they still.
Yeah, before that it is a clear water, and after that it becomes turbid.
Well, it could also be because they break up, and then the visibility goes down, or the absorbance goes down.
No, but it is that is what I thought in the beginning, because I thought that this oil is forming an emulsion or something like that. And but when we are growing it other substrates like glycine or some other similar kind of cells are produced. So that is the reason why this is a biology. We will come to that. So
have you made control experiments where you just incubate out cells and then look how the suspension?
A control experiment could not be done at this high temperatures because the cell runs these.
No, just use the same equipment, but not putting cells and putting your.
Even if we see that, because it is already contaminated. Because otherwise, we have to have a separate cell which is all those difficulties are there. Because this once that steel vessel is used, it is contaminated. It is very difficult to decontaminate because by heating it is not dying. So how can you decontaminate? So that is that control experiment I have done at 90 degrees without sealing. That is that process I can show you. So this in this experiment we find that at 300 degrees is the maximum turbidity we get, and under the microscope also we get the maximum number of cell mass. I have not done a systematic counting, but it is a turbidity measurement graph. And one thing is that even at low temperatures, growth is the slow process. So and in the discovery of this growth actually, it is that is our as an accident actually. As I told you in the beginning, my experiment is actually crystal growth is one of our activity, and for that we use this 50 degree temperature bath. So we found that we have actually poured some rainwater into that accidentally, fallen into that when we kept it there. And a few months after that, the 50 degree bath was developing turbidity, and we had a layer of oil on surface of that. So in this bath was alone creating this kind of turbidity. So that was the one observation which has led to this this finding that these organisms are multiplying. So there are several series of accidental observations which has resulted into this one. So this is an experiment which is done at and I wanted a growth curve. This is a typical micro growth curve, and there are next two slides are also there. This is a 70 degree experiment in which we have taken this iodine and ethanol and water as the growth medium, and after sealing it, we find that keeping it at 70 degrees centigrade, what we did is to monitor the turbidity in real time using a computer. Some light is passed through this sample, and then the light intensity is measured and recorded using a computer. And we see that the first decrease is due to the decoloration of the iodine. I don't know how that is taking place. In the control experiment also, the iodine loses color, and then after remaining clear for some time, then the turbidity increases, and then very fast it increases. You can see the minutes here, and then it remains stable, and after that we observe a peak here, and then a decrease. This is a settling phase of the growth. So this is a typical microbe growth of a lag phase and a growth phase, and then a steady state and a decline. So this is observed in this microbes, and you see that the substrate used is iodine and ethanol, and I don't think any non-microbes will grow in such a substrate, because this iodine and ethanol are killer of almost all the common type of microbes. But there may be special microbes, but we don't have that any Eschimophiles, chance of finding Eschimophiles in our laboratory like this. So this is an experiment which actually given us confidence that this is an organism.
But have you measured that ethanol is metabolized? Have you measured CO2 production in your system?
CO2 production is, I don't think it is consuming the carbon, and I don't think it is producing any gas. There is no gas production. We don't see any bubbling action.
Well, no, but CO2 may be dissolved.
Maybe there and it is getting dissolved. But these experiments are just done like that. It is not a microbiological like study has not been done. This is a growth study. And I have not gone to the metabolism, chemistry or anything like that. We have not done.
Yeah, but if we should try to get, before we have to go to dinner, could you please show us what you've done? I mean, have you tried to lyse, to break up the cells and look for DNA?
I'm getting so much delay.
And
so
also
this is a 90-degree growth, and in which seeded growth, in which you get the again that pattern, and without seeding. Without seeding also we get this pattern. There is no this peak and developing. So that is actually a clear indication for this. The seeding is creating this.
You made it earlier in a comment that it's already the cell is already contaminated. What exactly do you mean by that in view of this picture where you actually see?
Yeah, now this seeding we are doing the seeding with the 300-degree grown sample. So if there is a contamination, and that contamination can survive 300 degrees centigrade, then that is an extreme outlier. Then there is no chance of pre-contamination surviving negatively. So the DNA was tested by using basically the ethylene bromide is the sensitive test, and it has skip the time. It has given negative test for this.
But here you should have used spores. Huh?
Yeah, spores.
You cannot stain spores with a dye.
This test was done both for the spore as well as the grown cells. And we have broken it using, after freezing it with nitrogen, liquid nitrogen, and that is how we did it. Cells are broken, and then that mixture is added to the ethylene bromide.
You cannot break the cells putting them in liquid nitrogen. They will just, but you have to use spores as positive controls to see how they behave. Yeast is probably not a good control organism in this case. They break
this yeast cells, we get the test positive. We are getting the fluorescence enhancement.
You have to use an organism which is at least comparable to the type of organisms or whatever you have there. The yeast, you can always stain yeast. It's easy to get anything in yeast. But if you have spores, just bacterial spores.
No, you mean that even if you mechanically break the cell, it won't work.
Yeah, but then the DNA is out of the cell, and you cannot stain it. You know, you cannot stain free DNA. You have to have DNA in the cell to stain it. And there are much better methods to show whether there's DNA.
Yeah, that,
this
is
really,
one test
really
which was accessible. And there are other arguments which is going.
Can I just ask a question about, so if you took a spore, some spore, and you heated it up to 370 degrees, would it break?
I've never. Normally, you can autoclave and kill spores at about 120 degrees, but there are some spores which are very resistant, so you have to go up to 170 degrees or so.
But when you say you kill them,
they should be dead then.
Yeah, but one thing is being dead, but would they keep their morphological integrity?
Well, we have to ask our expert in thermophilia tumor.
I'll maybe finish this up. I'll finish and then
Okay, so then the other question, I think I've asked that before, but let me just be absolutely sure. After you have cooked them, I mean, if not, or when you heated them up very to this very high temperature.
Actually, I'm coming to that.
Do you then can you see?
Yeah, that
Afterwards,
actually
that
let me finish. That is answered here. So I found
Can I just ask, just in this discussion, if we believe that these they grow, the colonies grow, they can't be spores, right? I mean, the spore has to go through some coming as
No,
Yeah, they are,
spores,
just
they
grow.
get cells and then they grow and then they form spores again.
So I will quickly finish up this and then we can have the discussion. So I have found protein by this test, Sandler protein test. I tested DNA by using ethylene format. That is the fundamental thing. And then it could be stained by these dyes. The cell absorbs these dyes and gets colored. That is assumed as due to the presence of biomolecules. And the layering of can be more visible. Then we have identified this life cycle of this organism like this, and after several observations, what is happening is these tiny cells are produced in the system, and they grow to say 5 micrometer of size, and then they develop into larger liquid crop size, and tiny cells forms inside that, and then it is released out of this mother liquid. This is one fast cycle of operation. Another cycle of operation is that this mother cell liquid develops a hardened material over this, and then through some protrusion which is developed in this, and this daughter cell are released. This is a two life cycle, and the third one is actually the spore forming cycle, in which these cells grow to the size say 5 micrometer, etc., or 10 micrometer, and then you can see that they started forming a kind of pair formation, and after lingering around like this, they start to fuse together, and an outer layer develops on that, and this outer layer develops then coloring, and it becomes yellowish and harder, and then finally they become red spores. So this is the life cycle which has been identified after several observations. So this is after growing at this 300 degrees centigrade, you can see this these kind of cell structures, and that is why I cannot believe that it is some emulsion formation.
But we observe this in a light microscope, an ordinary optical light microscope. How do you get the resolution to resolve these smaller daughter cells?
They are only 1 micrometer size. I can show you the photograph of that.
But I mean, they are too
See,
small
this
for
is
you
the
to see
this is the mother liquid. You see this, it is not well resolved here. You can see some movement inside this.
But I'm not a biologist, but would you be looking for mitochondria, internal structure?
No, this only this 0.5 micrometer resolution is available in this light microscope, 0.3 maximum. So we can observe this 1 micrometer objects very clearly. So this is that mother cell. This peculiarity is that you can see a motion inside this. The daughter cells moving inside this. So you see that after the 300 degree growth. So that rules out many possibilities. And this is a stage in the spore formation. You can see that they are forming the pairs like this.
And this was again the other one. These were, how big was the bar on the previous one?
That is at all are 10 micrometer bars. Backspace now.
So
this is also 10 micrometer size. This is after the resolve. So the dye is absorbed by the cell, which is a characteristic of. And this is again the 200 nanometer peak of these cells, and it has got some peak here. I don't know what the reason, but this is a very prominent peak, and even at very low dilution, it shows this peak. These are some additional photographs of the 300 degree grown cells. See, these are simply as coming as bubbles. And this is a movie of that. This is how you observe that in the microscope, these things. So Anybody may think that it is some bubbles, but actually it is a living system like this.
But so this is observed at what temperature?
This is the after growing it at 300 degrees centigrade. You put that in the microscope, you can see these things.
So you take it out, right?
Yeah, after taking it out. So I don't have any arrangement to see the actual the actual temperature of 300 degrees. There may be advanced facilities by which actual observation can be done at 300 degrees centigrade. But we observe it after taking it out. This is a pair formation process. You can see there is a stage in the spore formation. See, the two cells are joined. This is a joining process. It's taking place. And they develop this color as they get more and more thick. And this is under the polarizer. And if you observe with reflected light under the polarizers, cross polarizers, they have this this beautiful bright image inside it, because they have there is the optically active biomolecules present in this, and there are other photographs also. This is a cluster of the daughter cells. After drying them, you are observing it using the polarizer, and the structure is very clear. These tiny cells. This is another image. These are the liquid which may grow to 50 micrometer like bubbles. That also has this kind of under the polarizer. It shines like this. And not only that, under the reflected light, generally they shine like very bright rings-like structures. I don't know why it shines like that. Normally a liquid drop doesn't do that. This has got under reflected light, it shows like this. So this is another part. I shall quickly finish this. I have so much exceeded time. This is an explanation why this is surviving at 300 degrees centigrade. So the possibility I am putting forward is that if this is an organism which is used for seeding the planet, then it has to survive 300 degrees centigrade, because at the earlier period when the cometary impact is maximum, no other organism can survive on Earth's surface. Whereas when the comet drops these organisms on the planet which is having 300 or 400 degrees centigrade, these organisms can live there and then start the life in that planet. And later, when the surface cools down, other DNA-based systems can evolve out of that. And then the second possibility is actually, you can read that paper. Second, the reason is the escape of this organism from the planet. You can see that at the end of the life of the star, usually the sunlight starts becomes a red giant, and this size of the sun will increase, and the luminosity will increase, and the temperature on Earth-like planets will increase. So all our organisms will die, and our ocean will evaporate, and we have a steaming condition. So that is an ideal situation for this organism. So it will grow, proliferate, and completely occupy the Earth, and all the carbon compounds will be utilized for their growth, and we will have an astronomically large multiplication of organisms in this planet. And when the star emits the solar wind during the red giant stage, and our magnetic field of the Earth also will have died out because of the fourth reason, and these forces will be driven out into the interstellar space. So that way, from the planets, it can get transferred into the interstellar space, and once they are in the interstellar space, they can get incorporated into comets and then see the next generation of stars. So this is a kind of picture I found this fitting, and I don't know how much it is correct. It's already distinct. And why I call this as the starting point of life is that you see that all the thermophilic organisms are at the bottom here, the root of the tree, and it is assumed that the RNA DNA path has taken place like this and created all these organisms. This is just a slide I have taken from the internet, so not prepared by me. So what I think is that these organisms may be below this, and we may have to put them in a new domain of life, which is actually the starting domain. The origin of life may have taken place like this. These organisms may be starting the life, and then through evolution we are having this DNA and RNA, etc. And why these organisms are now having the DNA? Possibly because they have to survive this temperature, they have to survive radiation, ultraviolet rays. Perhaps this is the better design. So that is the possibility. So origin of life, we don't know where it has originated. This picture gives only how it propagates and stays. So this may be a life cycle of life. Life is created in the star, a planetary system, it is then exported and then comes back to another system. So this is just a recent news I found. This much area of the galaxy is possibly habitable area. So the life is possibly everywhere and is getting transported, and this much area of every galaxy is a habitable area. So thank you very much.
I've got to say before the talk that those of you who want a copy of Jeffrey's paper, they will be right outside the door.
Yeah, I think we should perhaps divide the discussion into two major areas. One is this extraterrestrial, and the second is what is it? And I would like to address the first one, the question whether it's extraterrestrial, because I seem to lack some evidence for this assumption. And especially I have severe problems with your understanding of the stratosphere, because I have been flying stratospheric balloons now for about 40 years. And one of the first things you learn when you start flying stratospheric balloons, that is, you need a whole lot of ground stations to get the signal for these stratospheric balloons, except twice a year in what we call turnarounds. When the very stable, very high wind pattern that exists in the stratosphere turns around, it goes normally east-west, then it goes west-east in the other half of the year.
What altitude are you speaking about?
And that's fall and spring. So when you normally fly, when you fly balloons in the summer, they will move, for instance, from Sicily to California in a week. They will go from Andøya in Norway all the way around the globe in a week.
At which altitude it's talking about?
When you are up in from 30 to 50 kilometers.
50 kilometers.
30 to 50 kilometers. You can fly anywhere there and you have a very stable wind pattern. And I know there are several groups in Tata Institute that are flying stratospheric balloons, and I think they will be extremely interested.
Is there a variation of tropical and...
Let me just finish. The people in Tata will be extremely interested to learn that in Kerala they can fly stratospheric balloons with just one ground station for months. I mean, it's not known that the stratosphere behaves like this anywhere on the globe. That there are very stable wind patterns in the stratosphere that we normally use to move our balloons around, and they are very dependable. So I have a very hard time understanding how you can have spores hanging there. I have also a very hard time understanding how you can have spores coming all the way along the track of a bolide, because if you leave material in the beginning of a track, it's from ablation, and the temperatures in ablation would normally be 1500 to 2000 degrees. And you don't just remove material and then pop out some cold material that can survive afterwards. I mean, it burns in the beginning. You could break it up at the end and get some material out that would have been protected due to the ablation process. So I have two very severe problems with your idea about extraterrestrial void.
So I think the second problem is the special nature of this object should explain whether the mechanical property of this material, whether it can get dispersed. The other thing, I am not an expert on this atmospheric science, that is an assumption. So basically, when you read about the stratosphere, it is assumed to be a quiet area compared to troposphere, and I don't know much about the, as you said, about the atmospheric science. And I have to see whether in Kerala region, whether at that time it was quiet, there is no sonal wind or something like that.
No, but you have the experts sitting in Tata, so you can ask them.
Yeah, that I have not done. It could be a possibility.
But I don't know how to disperse anything. I mean, it just doesn't stop. I mean, if you remove, break up something, the products will still be moving with several kilometers a second, and they will still be heated up. I mean, you are not disposing. It's not a dispository. You are not popping things out that suddenly are falling asleep in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's all moving and it's all burning. I mean, you have to protect them. You cannot disperse them.
It is extremely provoking what you say, especially the point that there's an organism which has not DNA, which is on the basis of all the other organisms which are basically dependent on DNA as the major information molecules. Just the transition.
This is actually, these things are speculative argument.
But I think what you should do is get together with some people who are skilled microbiologists, and then let them extract whatever is in it as an informational molecule, and then find out whether it is DNA or not. And when you have the DNA, then you can also tell much more about the affiliation of this organism to other known organisms. The whole thing is provocative, but the most provocative and challenging thing is your argument about an organism which is proliferating without an information molecule of a DNA type.
No, I have not said that it is actually lack of time. I am not
explaining. And I think before you continue telling the story to other people, I think you really have to test this and your argument really demands extraordinary care and proof.
Yeah,
it is.
It's not supported by extraordinary evidence.
Not at all. So there are people that work with these type of extreme organisms, and they could help you also to extract DNA. It's possible.
See, but what gives me the why I present this is that this experiment that it is growing at 300 degrees centigrade is a fact. Anybody can repeat that. And regarding the DNA, I have done that ethylene bromide study. It can have another explanation. Another point is that the phosphate requirement for the DNA with this iodine solution and the ethanol doesn't have any phosphate nutrients usually. I don't know whether this micro contamination is there, but my observation is that without phosphate they grow, and by adding a phosphate there is no growth enhancement. So that is why I am doubting the presence of DNA. That is one reason. So my assumption is that it could have an alternate genetics which is more stable at 300 degrees centigrade. And this story of there being the last common ancestor is a speculative discussion which doesn't have any evidence. It is a fitting of this idea. And the observation actually, the experiment actually is the growth at 300 degrees centigrade and my test of DNA.
I think this is more sensational than finding life on Mars. You really have to disprove this.
Which one?
Yeah, well, this is it doesn't fit at all with the whole understanding of evolution, and it doesn't fit at all in our concept of life.
Because there is no DNA.
There's no DNA.
Yeah, but what do you know about the bottom of your tree? There's nothing to fit.
You
cannot say that the first life form.
You know, you have a heterotrophic organism.
See,
in principle, your organism
there
is
is
a
an
very simple heterotrophic organism. This organism has to have a machinery to degrade the cedar oil or any kind of substance. There has to be a metabolism, there has to be a transformation, and this transformation is due to an enzymatic apparatus. This enzymatic apparatus is encoded in DNA.
See, let me point out that. See, why there should be DNA? Because for a biosystem to operate, it should have reproductive capacity, metabolism. These are identifying characteristics of life. And DNA may not be the information molecule. The information can be contained in another type of molecule.
The only life we know of is based on DNA.
But we must be prepared to accept another kind of life form,
which is on the basis of our life.
Now, are you saying this was not life then?
No, I think there is DNA.
That is actually that is a problem I have. You have told me.
You just told us that DNA cannot be possible.
See, at the onset of your question, you have told me that consult some microbiologist and have some collaborative work. That's what I tried. But the moment I say that there is no DNA, you go back. Is this not life? So you are talking something else. So there is no question of collaboration. Nobody believes that. But the experiment shows that this system is growing, is multiplying, and it is consuming chemicals. So what do we call it? It shows the kind of this life cycle like thing, like forming spores, and all these things it does. I don't know how to define that. If it is not life.
There's many other burning questions.
Yeah. So I'd like to say two things. First of all, there's nothing of this that you've shown us. You may have other information that convince me that this is a lie. I mean, I still don't see. You have not shown to us, I think, that that these entities they grow under 300 degrees centigrade. The only thing you've shown is that you have that the visibility or the visibility goes down, the absorbance goes up
because
after you have heated it. Let me just say. So there is, as far as I remember, there's some very old experiments before we knew about microorganisms. You take a sample, you have to take one sample and you break it into two, and then you annihilate life on one of them, and then you reinfect with the original sample, and then you document that this infected sample actually can grow. But before you even get there, you need to convince, without any reasonable doubt, that this is alive. And I agree with you. I mean, I'm not a biologist, but I know that it really grinds against everything that biologists they have learned. I don't understand the chemistry that should be involved in replication at more than 300 centigrades. I can't even imagine that. But let that be aside. I mean, I think it is, crazy things are always interesting. So let's try. But show us that it's alive. And then I want to say another thing, that I've spent quite some time with Philippa Owens from Australia, and she made quite a splash when she showed. She's a very skilled microscopist, and she's used these electron microscopy methods to show incredible structures. She was working on some sandstones deformation or deposit out in about a couple of kilometers down. She was helping some oil companies, and she realized, because she has some of the best instruments in the world, that there were these extremely small spherical structures that were popping up in many of her things, and they would stop growing when she was imaging them. But if she took the piece or the samples out and then put them in afterwards, she could see that they had grown, they had sort of multiplied. She spent several years trying to, interacting with biologists.
It is happening.
Yeah, well, but at this point in time, the jury is still out about whether this is life or not. And she's a very non-consuming. She's a very low-key, lovely lady that doesn't talk about transpermian. But the theory is she almost got fired for her university. Actually, I haven't heard from her in the last year and a half. So this is. No, but I'm just saying that I would definitely re-emphasize what's being said here. That separate these two things away. So try to see, well, what are the properties of something that really would come in with a comet. Don't talk to the biologists. I mean, they can't sleep thinking about things that would be able to grow at 300 centigrade without DNA. This is just
but it
sort
can
of
grow with 300 centigrade with DNA.
No.
No,
I don't think so.
It's modern first.
Okay, I would like to continue here because I really agree that Rubens is the person that has shown us some things that we had not previously imagined. Things like DNA in very, very, very small cells that actually reside inside the cells and not in the host minerals. And you can see them right, and she has done in situ things, in situ experiments. And you must excuse me, because being an electron microscopist of average standard, I cannot quite follow you when you say that you observe live growth during your experiment. Because what you really need to do is put some cells in a microscope and then observe them in situ at 300 degrees Celsius, and then see growth. Because the coloring experiment is not, I cannot comprehend it.
Actually the number increases, that is the thing. You are seeding it with a tiny drop, and then you see that the entire sample liquid is converted into this organism. That is growth. So I observe this growth. It can have a different explanation. That is, it satisfies some of the definitions. Like metabolism is taking place. It requires a medium or food, and then it multiplies. It shows a life cycle like this. It forms a spore. So I don't know how to define that. It is the only problem is there is no DNA.
I'm only saying it's very, very difficult to actually see.
So the analysis, as many of find out, is a very low-key results that I have done. Is many more tests are to be done, but these things are very, very clear. It grows, and it is this test shows there is no DNA. I don't know whether there is more sensitive test. There could be more analysis possible which can show up what is the genetic molecule possible, and with some speculation I have pointed out that PNA could be a candidate because it doesn't require the phosphate, because the phosphate, without phosphate it is growing. So that is why I suggested PNA as a possible candidate, a similar type of molecules.
Harry has been biting his tongue for 10 minutes now.
Okay, a couple of years ago I saw rain that was red. I saw orange-colored rain, and that was in Finland.
Finland?
Yes, but there is an explanation for that. And that was this rust I mentioned you earlier. Rust is a type of fungus that's very difficult to see unless you know where to look at. Here it grows in Finland and Sweden, it grows in tips of spruce trees, for example. There's a certain type of rust that grows in Kerala. There are other types of rust there all over the world. And these are difficult things to see if you don't know what to look at. In Finland it didn't make a big news because water comes from the tap here, and then people...
It is the entire water is colored.
But you could see all the pools were red colored.
Oh, to see.
And these rust spores, and just happened to be also a serious amateur mycologist. I studied mushrooms for fun. They look exactly like your spores. Same shape, same size, same kind of variations. They're dark cells, dark spores that are still alive. There are light ones that are dead already, and then ones in between. They can be one-walled or two-walled. There are certain shapes. I mean, there was another type of spore there also that I think I was able to identify. So I see those as spores of these types of fungi. They're not proper mushrooms, they're fungi. Then okay, regarding that, I think you should really try to get an electron microscope picture of these original spores.
Of those spores.
That should really name down if they are any kind of fungal spores. It should be an easy thing to do.
Yeah, that
if you get all of them in an electron microscope. maybe somebody can help.
Really, if you cannot get access to the
Yes, then
instruments,
they
I
will
would be
have
happy
the
to help
DNA,
you.
but
Which one?
I would be happy to help you if you cannot get access to instruments. Really.
Electron microscope.
So,
Yeah, that actually there is another laboratory in Cochin which they are now it is working on. I will be shortly taking it.
okay, then continuation. You mentioned movement inside cells. I've looked at dead cells inside, and I see movement inside dead cells just from Brownian motion, from the light source that comes from behind. And the smaller the feature is, the easier you see it. You see it in your own blood if you look under the microscope. You see small things moving there.
Moving inside a cell.
It's just Brownian motion of some tiny particles. It doesn't have to be alive for you to see it moving. I mean, non-living things can also move under the microscope. Then I think for you to claim the full life cycle, you should be able to make the spores again and then do a second life cycle. Do the whole thing kind of again. In this picture that you showed here, I couldn't see anything. See two blobs close by, I could not see one case where I could see one blob kind of becoming one. That was something
That actually takes time because the cells linger around each other and then you see that some of them are joined, some of them are not joined, like that different stages you can see. You cannot see the entire process in one sitting.
Or it could be the other way, that you see the ones that are joined and they're breaking up, and then you see the broken ones. It's hard.
So you find just like we trace out the life cycle of stars, we can't see the process, but we see them in different stages. Then we assume the life cycle. So that way only it is possible. You see that some of them are just lingering around, some of them joined, some of them have already formed a common outer.
Yeah. Okay. One additional comment. Travel from other stellar systems, from 10 million stars to the Earth. It has been shown that life to travel from another planet to our solar system is unlikely because of the small cross section of our planet. So it would take a longer time than the age of the universe. But it could be interesting if these kind of cells could form in interstellar clouds, in the very cloud where our own solar system formed.
That is the process I explained at the last because this water-containing planets are now said to be a very common thing around stars. There is some fact I mentioned here. So in any star system there can be several water-containing planets. So in those planets these organisms can grow during its red giant stage, and it can multiply and then contaminate the interstellar space. And when the comets form in this interstellar space, these cells get into the comets. So depending upon whether which region they form, the comets, the concentration of cells in the comet can be very high. So I assume that such a comet is possibly this one. This is assumption. And also I think there are some cometry in the Kuiper belt region. There are some red comets observed. I cannot connect it now, but there is some extreme redness of some of the comets in the this belt. So it is also not well explained why they are reddish color. So this may be a correlation, but just like your spore form is a possibility, this is another possibility which I am final findings will decide which is the correct.
It's Ib, Kai and Axel, and then we close it because we have to go to dinner. Ib?
There's one very interesting experiment you could perform that would settle whether it was coming from outside the Earth. I mean, considering that you have dusted several thousand square kilometers with these spores, if they are different kind of life, you should be able to go out and dig up a lump of earth anywhere within these several thousand square kilometers, and you should find these things in there.
If a balloon experiment is performed, possibly you can find traces of this. stratosphere.
Has that been done?
It has
I mean, they should have multiplied by now.
No,
If they are
it is not possible
such a
to
hard
multiply
life form that they can move through space.
It
Then
won't,
when they come down to Earth, they should really start multiplying.
They didn't like salt.
That is a good thing because I found that they don't like salt. So our warships are protected.
Yeah.
Well,
We're not a very hospitable place for them.
well,
So they're only having fun in the lab when it's 300 degrees and they have sulfuric acid to feed off. But on Earth,
there's a lot
it's too
of
hostile.
freshwater lakes in Kerala. So it should multiply. It should be there.
Not
You
necessarily
should
might
be
get
able
killed
to
by
grow up.
the
No, it
successful
won't grow like that because at room temperature the growth is very slow, and if it falls on the waterways, it will be washed out. So it won't multiply in ordinary water ponds because it will be cleared off by rain. And when it reaches the sea, it's not possible for them to grow there.
Kai?
Have you tried to calculate how many spores came down with the water? Do you know the precipitation? And,
Actually the calculation, rough calculation I performed, some 50 tons will be required for this, explain this distribution.
15 tons.
Yeah. So that cannot be explained by a uplifting process or
It was an interesting question that actually Godfrey answered. Whether he was actually wondering whether he can bring some sample with him. But the problem is if he asks the customs whether they can possibly bring possibly extraterrestrial material with them, the hopes of getting permission for that are rather slim. So I think this is first of all a serious issue that we actually should think about. How on earth should we begin to study these things? So, I mean, it would be, for example, ideal if Kai says you would be able to analyze it in a much better way, then you should get a sample, and then we should somehow get the customs to give us permission to...
Actually, you don't ask. You put them in a shampoo looking like a bottle and put them into your toilet.
No, it is, I can hide it and bring it, but the question is it will be officially known. Because some experiments will be
Can I bring a piece of the
and
Mr.
it is very easy to bring it. It is a small sample, is very easy to bring. But it is officially known that I brought it here. Then I've been told that way, violating it. Because bringing an organism here, especially the common people, will be alarmed.
But this issue may have been possibly, of course, solved because Harry said that he has already seen, that you have already seen red rain in Finland. So then, if that's really true, then of course we don't need to worry about this. So the question then is, are any of the properties of the red rain in Finland comparable to any of the phenomena that Godfrey has been reporting? In particular, the temperature resistance and the form of these and stuff like this, mother cell behavior, whatever.
Very short, Harry, or else we do it over there.
I don't know about temperature resistance, if that has been tested, but correlation with rain, yes. It's definitely correlation with rain. Same way as it was. It's also kind of localized. I mean, this was in center of Finland, maybe 400 kilometers across. It is a pretty big area.
Yeah, this regarding that, suppose rain has occurred here, and then the reason common SP, this explanation possibly somebody has given us. Is it well proven that it is the fungal spore?
Oh yes.
It's a microbiological study.
Well, I've looked at it with a microscope and.
But similarity here also what happened is such a similarity. Because the Kerala also, the microbiology, they examined them under the microscope, they said that it is a fungal spore. So just by physical observation, or was there any actual culturing to see that whether it is fungus?
Well,
anybody that did the culturing?
This happened in a year when this fungus spore was extremely
actually,
hot. You could see it everywhere, and it was very common. And previous time it was common about 15 years ago. And at that time you could see kind of similar kind of thing.
At which date it occurred? Finland case?
August, September.
2000.
I mean, the mushrooms grow in such a different cycle
every year
in the tropics and in Finland.
Which year?
The two of you are at the same hotel, so I think we need to break it right now to make the. You have plenty of time. But there was one classic one.
You have added lots of nutrients in this course. Have you considered trying to kill these objects? Have you tried to experiment with models?
Ja, vi ser på I er meget smart på det. Så snart man
Okay, but the next